Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the September edition of the React meetup. My name is John Yardley. First of all, I want to give a special welcome to our friends at Anthony Nolan. We've got some people from No Girls, Cobar, Ada's List, and Founders and Coders. So thanks to you guys for joining this evening. As I said, my name is John Yardley. I am a tech director at Red Badger. For those of you who don't know about Red Badger, we are not only just the co-sponsors of this event this evening, we are also a digital consultancy who specialise in digital transformation through delivering the right product in the right way. If you'd like to find out more about that, speak to me or one of the other Badgers like floating around. We are hiring for lots of positions at the moment. We're growing really well. So we're hiring all levels of engineers. And lots of React positions, so yeah, come and speak to one of us later if you're interested in learning more. So a few housekeeping things. We have a code of conduct, which is available at meetup.react.london if you want to go and check that out. We will be having an interval after the second talk where you can go and freshen up and grab another beer. Another small minor point about ticket allocation. So these events sell out very, very quickly, and due to the strict security rules at Facebook, we can't reallocate tickets on the day. So make sure if you book a ticket, try and come and spread the word that it's not easy for us to allocate tickets on the day. You can tweet along at #ReactLondon, and if you're a Slack fan, we have a Slack channel. We're on @RedBadgerTeam, and there are instructions on how to join that at meetup.react.london. So today we've got three really good talks. First of all, we have Roman, who's going to be talking to us about React Reveal. Roman, stage is yours.
Right, hello, can you hear me? Great. So here I came to talk about the React Reveal as a library, React library, obviously, that I've wrote a couple of years ago. And it sort of started, I'll describe a problem that I faced with React. Obviously, React is a very fast framework. And what I found, and probably I'm slightly dyslexic or something, but what I found when you change routes or pages in React, and if it's large blocks of text, you can't actually see that there was a change. Sometimes I would click several times a link just to make sure that I actually went to the page, as opposed to knowing that it happened. So basically, back in the old days when we were coding for HTML and there were no the sophisticated tools like React or Angular or whatever, there would be when you click on a link, normally there will be like a small flash, or like you can kind of see that the page is gone, like it would be blank, and then another page would come up, and it's sort of a natural thing to do. So for example, if I move the hand, you can see how it moves from one point to another. It's not just goes from here and it suddenly appears there. It's sort of very confusing to many people, and certainly it was for me. And so a couple of years ago, I wrote a small library, which is I called the React Reveal. So basically, the idea was that you would sort of add some animation to the routes, and probably you've seen all of you these perhaps annoying animations at the marketing websites that you scroll the page and things sort of pop left, right, center, explode, and stuff like this. So this is what's known as a reveal animations, is the animations that launch as as the page elements come into view. So this is the there were a few years ago there were no libraries. I couldn't find any that would do it for you. The reason, and you couldn't use the regular HTML library because of the fact that they normally would modify DOM directly. They wouldn't go via the virtual DOM as React requires you to. So that's great. That's the website, which is reactreveal.com, which has got a framework. So if you've got a laptop or anything, you can go ahead and either search or go directly React Reveal just to get the feel what sort of the animations are there. So yes, and it's great for marketing websites and things like this when you sort of want to draw attention to as people scroll and they might be sort of thinking about different things, and the animation would sort of smooth the flow of content presentation. So that's one thing that I think is sort of a lot of people obviously are using this library for, and but it's got a lot more to it. So if it was just about it, it probably would be like very sort of boring and wouldn't have much use. So I've added a few more things to it, which I hope I'll talk a little bit about this in this presentation. So maybe just a quick show of hands. If do people here use transitions in their applications? So they're about maybe. Oh wow, that's it's quite a few actually. Yeah. Anyone using React Reveal specifically or no? I hope after this talk, I'll convince at least a few of you to use a React Reveal, which is I think is the, obviously I'm a bit biased, but is best animation library, Reveal library you can use, and maybe like for these people who using the transitions, say you sort of who's rolling the sort of transition library themselves, or you're using something else, like already a third-party library, like who's using third-party library is and who's using the rolling out their own transition sort of, right? Okay, so quite a few of you. Okay, I think the majority are actually using rolling out their own transition sort of behaviors. So yes, so I think I think it's after a few years I can believe it's a very wrong thing to do. There's so many problems with this. There's so many that is a lot better to use something that has already been done. So obviously, I'm here talking about the React Reveal, which is, I think, the library you should use. But if you hate me for some reason, then obviously feel free to use some library, some different library. Right. So so here's the website, and you can go if you have a laptop and have a look at the animations. So as you can see, there are some very annoying to some people, but if you use it, if you don't overuse it, this is be very, very helpful, because you do need these, smooth the transitions so they wouldn't appear like suddenly and out of nowhere. Right. Okay. So maybe I'll talk about the how to use it. So basically, the library is quite easy to use. So you don't have to add any. So I don't know. Many of you probably heard of Animate CSS. So those of you who use transitions and stuff like this. So it's sort of based in large parts on the transitions that the CSS effects that are sort of they are coming from the Animate CSS. So the problem with this, that if you use Animate CSS, it would you would have to include the entire library, so your CSS file might be quite large, grow all the time. Whereas the React Reveal is using the generating basically these CSS rules on the fly, which is like all these effects. I mean, obviously, as they're all used in the same page. There are quite a few of them, but they're generated on the fly. So your CSS file won't add anything. So what you do is you just to use one of the components, you would use you just say import like for example, for a fade component is import fade from React Reveal /fade. So that's how you get the fade component. No CSS lines will be added to, or whatever CSS bundle. So that's, I think, a great thing. And there are a bunch of parameters that you can use. They're all covered in documentation, and all of the different rules, they will be generated on the fly, like programmatically. It's very, very quick. I've tested extensively on different browsers. So that's, I think that's a good thing to use. So, right. There are several problems with with different libraries that many of you probably like. I'll try to convince you. I hope I convince at least some of you that you should be using transitions. They're really, really good for UX and UI, and like it will help to smooth the flow of your sort of application. If whether you display the error messages, adding the products to a shopping cart, things like this. You really, really want to make sure that the things are not popping just from somewhere else, just without any advance warning. So there are many problems with the your own solutions or many other solutions. So one of the biggest problems, especially for a marketing website, is the way the Google bot treats these things. Obviously, if it's a consideration for your application, if you want to be indexed by Google, because Google these days can evaluate the React application, it will index them. So the way most of these libraries work, or probably the way you would implement them, it will hide content, and that would sort of suggest to the Googlebot to delist it or derank it. So the React Reveal is one of the, I think it's the only one library that doesn't do this. And if you go and there's a tool in the Google Search Console that renders a Google, you can see all the elements that are revealed. The Googlebot sees them, and probably hopefully will index them. Because if you do it with most other solutions, they will not, and probably your own, because it's kind of tough act to follow, because Googlebot does not like reveal animations at all. There's also a few different approaches that people are using, which is one is the most sort of recent one is Intersection Observer, which is the very good API, but it doesn't. Safari doesn't support it. So, the most library they use either the Intersection Observer or the some sort of a timer to do the review animation. So React Review, I think, is the only one that sort of blends the approaches. Uses the Intersection Observer for the browsers that support it, and the request animation frame is like a very fast timer for the Safari, essentially. Right. So that's I think all of these things are kind of hard to to think through when you design your own. And I think like many third-party libraries, they sort of also not doing this properly. I'll just check my notes. Right. Okay. One other thing, if I have time. Yes. I wanted to say is the one good thing. Like there, if you do go to examples, you can see an example, but with the advanced usage. So what I was talking about is like more sort of basic usage when you sort of want to present content or smooth the the appearance of the content. But what you can also do is you can what the React Reveal allows you to is you can actually link your component state to the reveal element. So basically, when something is true in your state, the element will appear, and as it goes to false, the state variable, the element will disappear off screen. So you can use it, like, for example, for an error message or stuff, things like this. So basically, a lot of these messages, obviously, they, I'm sure, in most React apps, you've got loads of them. The messages, they're just popping up, and it's not as good user experience if they were sort of smoothed a little bit on the screen. It's maybe like a good example would be if a lot of people using the when they want to control the sort of the attention of the user, they would use a pop-up or like a big font or something, things like this. So it can be another tool in your toolbox if you want to draw an attention to a certain element. And I think it's a very good. People hate pop-ups. And when they're being told where to look and what to do, but if you do have to use something like this, I think this is the example. Yes, you need really really use something like this animated sort of approach, because it's the not as bad, in my opinion, as the some other things. So so thanks for bringing the example. So I just maybe quickly go through the example. So it's so easy to use. So the basically you just import the effect from the React Reveal library. So the one good thing that when you do a fade, when you import the the slash fade, is that it just imports the code that is relevant to the fade. There are many effects, and none of them they would be imported. So it's just a fade effect. So it's very good for your bundle size. So it won't, like, I think it's just a couple of kilobytes. So won't add too much to your bundle size. And the usage is probably sort of self-explanatory. You just wrap your whatever content you have, or like custom React component, or there's it's compatible with the styled components, everything. So it's extremely easy to use. I mean, I'm probably yes. There are some more advanced example. You can have a look. Obviously, I can't explain everything in such a small talk, short talk. Yes. So the there's a GitHub npm everything. So if you do end up using the library, do give it a star. It's that way. It sort of helps a lot when you develop library. Obviously it's an open source. I'm not making money off it, so that's pretty much the only reward, I guess, is you guys starting it. So yeah, and I will. I really hope maybe some of you will learn something new today. And yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you. Yeah, Q&A.
Hi, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Raymond.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for Raymond about React Reveal and the library that he's...
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, I was just wondering, how did you make it work with the Googlebot?
It's a trial and error. I mean, it's completely not documented. Like, I spent a couple of weeks actually meticulously changing different parameters and seeing, and it's also rate limited, this rendering thing. So yeah, I mean, like I've changed until I could see content on screen. It's horrible. It's not documented. But I finally sort of reverse engineered how the Googlebot, the worst thing I remember that if you do issue some resize, because it resizes the window, and if you respond, I think, to this call, it it just thinks that the content is invisible. So yeah, I mean, took a long. Probably that was the worst problem I had was this library, is how to make it compatible with a Googlebot.
Okay. So responding on scroll, I mean specifically, because obviously the content is hidden when you first start, and then it becomes not hidden.
Well, I mean, it's not hidden. It's visible. Yes, obviously on scroll it hides, but initially it's visible. So everything is visible because Googlebot does not scroll. So which I found, it resizes the so you have to ignore the resize calls and the events and do the and scrolling. It doesn't do scrolling, so you can hide it on scroll. So that's the.
It just makes the window longer and longer.
No, it works fine. I mean, you have to. The only problem, it has to be really quick because obviously, but it is quick. I mean, when it first loads, everything is visible, so all the crawlers should see all the content. It's just as you scroll, it hides. It's really, really quick. It's using the React, which is quite fast in these regards. So, but never been any problem at all. So, but it was the worst problem I ever had, and I don't think any other review library solved it. And if you're using these things in your application, do check how the Googlebot sees your content, because I don't think anyone doing it, to be honest.
Very cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I think you got off quite lightly there. Thanks again, Roman. Cheers. So next up we have Jason from Beamery. Is that correct? Beamery. So Jason's going to be talking to us about micro front ends. Do you need to plug that in? Yeah. I think it's just a thing here. I think you can just plug it in and it should work. So Jason Felix from Beamery, and he's going to be talking to us about micro front ends and how he's managed to sort out some problems with legacy code using this technique, I suppose is technique. Brilliant, cool. So I'll hand over to Jason. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Jason Felix and I'm a software engineer at Beamery, and today I'd like to talk to you about micro front ends and how we've solved legacy code. So, how many people here use a monolithic front end? Quite a few. Okay, that's good. So hopefully today I can get you on micro front ends. So first off about Beamery, it's a talent engagement platform. It's basically just a CRM that helps companies manage relationships between their candidates and companies. So what is Beamery? How was Beamery 1 built? It was built as a monolithic application, and it was all built in Angular. This caused quite a few problems down the line, but we had to do it this way as we were a small startup when we began. I only joined about 8 months ago when we started to transition. And after our Series A, we decided we wanted to build Beamery 2.0. And to do that, we knew that we did not want to carry on in Angular 1 because it was quite dated software, and we wanted to try something new and get a newer framework going. So as you can see, everything was built in Angular. The grid, profile, sidebar, nav bar, and the filters. So what's wrong with the monolith? The first thing that's very blurry for monolith is ownership. Because everything's in one code base, as your team expands, it's harder to declare who owns what. And if you've got everything in one code base, it's hard to distinguish who owns what part of the code. So if you wanted to build a new feature, a lot of people may be stepping on each other's toes, and it can get a bit messy, especially with all the PRs going across. So how do we keep developers interested? This is another problem. Because we're stuck with one dated library, we need to figure out how we can keep newer developers, for example, React developers, Vue developers, any front-end frameworks, how we can get them interested in Beamery and developing for us. And also, horizontal scaling is extremely difficult when you've got a monolithic application, because you can only go up, you can't go horizontally. You can't create new applications. So what are our options? Our first option was to upgrade to Angular 5, but Google's processes isn't very easy, so we didn't want to use that as an option. Also, Angular 5 isn't something that we thought we'd want to use in the future, so we decided we didn't want to go down that route. The next thing we could do is throw everything and start from scratch. So we could have started from scratch and built up in React. But we didn't want to have two applications being built at the same time, because if we wanted to create new features for existing customers, we would have to build it in the old application. And whilst we're building a new one at the same time, we'd have to split resources far too much. So we decided we didn't want to do that either. Also, when we're bug fixing our older application, we'd have to split resources for that as well. So the third option that we found out about was micro front ends. So who has tried using micro front ends or anything similar? Okay, I've got a few hands. So what are micro front ends? Basically, micro front ends is a multi-tier application. So it's most basic term is microservices for the front end. So like in the back end, when they first started being built, it was just one huge back end. Now you can split them into microservices. It's the same for the front end. So you can see how we started to build out and change our old application to use in React. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to decouple all of your components. So for example, you can see the title bar at the top. Before, that was Angular, but we could change it if we wanted to. We could upgrade it if we wanted to React or any other framework we wanted. It also allows you to build any of these components independently. So if you had a team of developers that wanted to create a new filter bar or a new main grid, you could do that. And they could build and deploy just the header. So it allows you to develop code much faster. So why micro front ends? So ownership, because everybody gets their own they can use their own GitHub repo for all of these separate applications. It means a lot of less stepping on each other's feet. It allows developers or teams to have proper ownership over the different apps in your micro front end. This also helps keeping developers interested and future-proofing your application as well. Because if newer frameworks come out, you don't have to create a whole new application for it. You can just upgrade different applications on your page, one by one. So that's gradual migration. You could say, for example, if you said you wanted the sidebar on the side to be React in a year's time, you could easily do that, and you don't have to redo the entire application. So how do we make it here? So Single Spar. Single Spar is a meta framework built by Canopy Tax. It's awesome. So basically, it allows you to create micro front ends really easily. It allows you to decouple and migrate from a monolith to a micro front end really easily as well. So what you can do is you can easily plug in your monolith into Single Spar and then gradually migrate parts of your application. It's really good paired with React Loadable because all of your applications that you plug into Simple Spar are lazy loaded. So you can lazy load all of your micro apps, and also if you pair it with React Loadables, you can load the components of your micro applications lazy as well. So there's no performance downside there. It keeps your bundles low and it keeps the speed of the website up. And it's open source, which is an added bonus. So this is the lifecycle methods of Single Spar. So this is how you create an application in Single Spar. So the first method is the bootstrap bootstrap method. It's invoked once before you register. Sorry, after you've registered, but before you mount it for the first time. It's only run once. But you can do this to do things like if you need to fetch users, fetch companies, or whatever you need to do. Then there's the mount function, which is invoked whenever the registered app is not mounted, but the activity function returns a true value. So I'll explain what the activity function is in the next slide. But basically, this is for when you want to hook your application into the micro framework, or when you want to, so it's for when you hook it. And then unmount is the absolute opposite to the mount, so that you can unhook your application. And then this is how you register your application. So you import single spot at the top. You can give it a name. Then the loading function, this is interesting because it allows you to dynamically import your component. How many people here have used dynamic imports with Webpack 2? Quite a few. So this is basically how you lazy load. You just do import, and then you pass it as a function, and then it will lazy load your component. So this will only import once this function has been invoked. And this is the activity function that I was talking about before. So when this returns true, that mount function will be invoked. You can see there's just the path name. It gives you the location path because that's normally where people would want to load their application. They would use the URL location. Then you just simply register your application and start single spot. It's really easy to use. I totally recommend it. So the advantages and disadvantages. The huge advantage is being framework agnostic. So you can use whichever frameworks you want. Upgrading is extremely easy as well. You don't have to do your entire application. So it really promotes using new frameworks and keeping up to date, which is awesome. Building new features on legacy. So this is a good one as well because you don't need to create another application. You can stick with your legacy code, and you don't need to throw away good code. You can just build up on what you already have. And you can gradually, because everything is modularized now, you can gradually take out parts and replace it with new ones. Lazy loading, because, it's awesome. You don't need to load your whole thing at one time. You can load everything lazy so it keeps it fast. And separate building. So at Beamery, this is a really good one because our team is growing a lot. So, and our application is loading a lot. So we want to be able to build separate parts of the application. For example, even the filters component is quite large now. So we need to be able to, we've actually got a team just working on the filters, and it's really helpful for them to be able to just develop that and ignore everything else. And also, you can communicate via an interface because everything's decoupled. You don't have to communicate between the applications directly, which is extremely helpful because it stops people stepping on each other's feet and it promotes good code. Hiring is also a lot easier because if you're using a monolith and it's stuck with, you're stuck with one framework, you're limited to who you can hire. It's a lot harder to say hire a React developer when when you're stuck with Angular code. So that's another bonus. So the disadvantages. So I've come across two. There's most likely more, but I've personally come across two. So dependency and styling collisions. Because you've got you're going to have loads of different apps now loaded into the same single spa micro front-end application. The styling collisions can be an issue because things like Z indexes can clash. And dependencies, if you've got multiple versions of React and stuff, they may clash as well. Managing states between front-end applications is also difficult because now they don't share the same Redux store if you're using Redux. So there are a couple ways you can get around that. The most common way of passing information now that you've got a micro front-end application is using the location URL. The other way, you can't pass large amounts of data just using the URL because it's limited, obviously. So the other way is you could add an object to your global window and then create like a messaging service. So you could register all of your applications to that that messaging service on the global object, and then you could pass around your information that way, which is quite a good way of doing it. So thanks for listening. If you want to find out more about Beamery, say hi to someone in a Beamery t-shirt, or go to beamery.com. Thanks.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Jason, for that. I believe you're going to be at the pub afterwards to answer any questions. Cool. So we're going to head straight into the break. Go grab a beer, go and stuff your face with pizza, go for a wee. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Cheers. Hello, hello, hello. If you'd like to take your seats, we'll start the second half of this evening's meetup. In your own time. Thank you and welcome back. So I hope you're all refreshed and relieved after that short break. We're now going to be presented to by Nikas, who's going to be talking to us about React Static, an alternative library to Gatsby for generating static websites. I hope that's a good enough intro. So warm welcome, please. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm really nervous, so don't expect too much. But you know, the title of this talk is intentionally a little bit cheeky, but in reality, it's just our story of how we had a problem and we decided to solve it using a little less known tool called React Static. My name is Nikas. I'm a tech lead at Hostmaker. I've been a front-end developer for the past 5 years, using React for the past 2. Hostmaker is a home rental management startup based here in London, but we have our cities all over the world, so like Thailand, the rest of Europe. And just like Beamery, at some point in our life, we had made it. We had survived long enough for a rewrite. And that's an important milestone in a startup's life. And we decided at that point to pick React and Node, just like all other successful startups. And we had kind of gone through this entire migration process. It took us a little bit over a year, but in the end, we were mostly there, except this one kind of crucial part of our entire product stack, and that's our website. So our website, as of 6 months ago, was still written using the legacy stack that we had been using like way back before. That was written by a third-party consultancy, the usual stuff. It had, it was slow. We had gone through some optimization sprints where we had tried to do all sorts of things to make the dead horse run faster, but it obviously didn't work very well. We had extremely slow builds due to one of those measures we had tried to take. So we had tried manually optimizing all the images in our application, and that basically led to like 25-minute build times, which is not super nice. And so at some point, half a year ago, the business said that, hey, we kind of need a brand refresh. We've been here with this website for a few years now. And so the tech kind of jumped, hey, let's do a rewrite. Those are always fun. So initially, we tried to look at the kinds of challenges that we're facing. And one of the biggest one is we have a lot of content. So I've mentioned that we're in multiple cities. That's 9. 9 different cities and like 6 country hubs for like country-specific information. Each of those have about 2 languages each. So it's English and the local language. And we basically have to have all of that unique content across 15 routes or templates or however you want to call it. So these are your home page, about page, and that sort of stuff. We also had a bunch of dynamically generated content, and we knew we wanted more in the long term. So that's like translations, Cosmic for content management, Greenhouse for careers API, and that sort of stuff. In the end, that amounted to like over 1,500 unique pages, each with their own unique content and unique routes. And we knew we had to support that during our rewrite. We also knew that we wanted to have a good search engine optimization story. So Google is the only one that kind of basically handles client-side web applications. and we wanted to have some sort of static rendering where all the content is available to all the other disenfranchised robots. And well, we also wanted to improve our page speed. As I mentioned, the old legacy website was kind of just not cutting it anymore. We didn't want to be probably fetching all of that dynamic content on every load, since that usually takes a lot of time. But you know, we had all these, and it's difficult. It's really difficult to sell to a business. Hey, we're gonna go away for 3 months, and then maybe you'll have a website, and you know, just hold your marketing, hold all the campaigns, all the tube stuff, etc. So that's difficult to sell. So we didn't want to do that. We knew we would never get away with it. So we wanted to migrate something to use something that would allow us to migrate iteratively. So to recap, we were looking for something that was React-based, just like all of our other products. We had migrated to a React-based stack. We knew we wanted something flexible, so it would have to integrate with our existing code base and support the iterative migration that I talked about. We also knew that we wanted something fairly simple. So since we've done the migration to Node and React and all that, we didn't start off without any employees, and those people had to learn new technology, and we didn't really want to overwhelm them with, say something like GraphQL or, hey, everything you knew before is now useless. So we wanted something that even our full stack developers could easily go and change and have an impact on. And most importantly, we wanted something long term. So we didn't want to do another rewrite half a year from now, and we knew we wanted something that would allow us to change strategies and evolve over time. So considering our previous experience, we were basically inspired by two things. Me personally, I have done. Who else here has used GitHub Pages? Probably quite a lot of you. I've got my own personal website on GitHub Pages. It seems like a very easy way to develop things. You just basically, you have a build tool, you put all your static content there, and your blog posts, etc., and you just click build. It's up there. You commit it to GitHub, and it's live. And that simplicity really resonated with us. Also, at that time, Gatsby was getting popular. So, one of those 15 newsletters you receive every day about JavaScript, that was always talking about how static generated sites are the future. So we decided, why not use a static site generator for our basically marketing website? That's mostly static content. Surely it should work. So we started looking at the kinds of static site generators that there are. And we knew we wanted to look at something React-based, so we kind of focused on that. And basically, there were a few large ones, and we just started going through each of them. So the first one up was Next.js, and these graphs are sorted by GitHub stars, the most important popularity metric in the world. Next.js is basically a framework for server-side rendered and isomorphic JavaScript applications. And we were actually even using that at the moment for one of our other applications. So it seemed like a great fit. Actually, we found out that it also, at some point, had added Next Export, which allowed pre-built apps. So it seemed like a very good use case for us. But considering our experience, even though it's a great framework, it's well documented, it's got a large community, in our other application, we felt that it was too much of a framework, and you basically were coding in Next.js rather than React. It had too much of a predefined structure, and in our case, we found it to be slow and difficult to optimize because it was just so complicated. There was a lot of things going on, and it was just difficult to actually figure out why and how things were breaking exactly. So going back to our scorecard that we were looking at, it was definitely React-based, but other than that, it didn't really strike us as the best option forward. So we kept looking. And we looked at Gatsby, which is basically right now, it's the de facto static site generator for React. It's basically everywhere. It's becoming a startup in its own sense. And well, Gatsby, in short, it's well documented. It's got a huge community. It's really fast and really powerful. It's basically what everyone's looking for. But for us specifically, we found a few problems. So I mentioned before that we didn't want to overwhelm our users who are new to React and that sort of stuff with even more new technology. And GraphQL really proved to be an issue. Basically, if you're coding Gatsby, you're using GraphQL, and that there's not a good way around it. It's also very plugin heavy. So basically, if you need to use a custom source or something like that, you kind of have to write your own plugin. And writing your own plugin seems daunting to us. We didn't really want to get into that kind of business. Of course, there are a lot of pre-configured plugins and that sort of stuff, but then you're at the mercy of the plugin maintainer. And if they don't implement something you don't like, you either have to do it yourself or hope that pull request gets merged in. So coming back to our scoreboard again, it was definitely React-based. It was definitely flexible, so it would allow us to do basically anything we wanted. And it would definitely scale long-term, considering other people's experience. But we didn't find it simple enough. So at this point, we were kind of at crossroads. We had two clear options, two well-supported ones. So why are we talking about this one then? I'm glad you like that. So, those people who follow 900 different newsletters and get everything, and they somehow have started all the libraries on JavaScript. I know most of you have that friend. So one of those colleagues actually recommended React Static to us. He had looked at it, started on GitHub, and we investigated it. So React Static is basically a fast, lightweight, and a powerful framework. At least that's what they claim, for building static, progressive React applications. And the main promise of React Static is the power of Gatsby without all the complexity of it. And that is just React. And that really resonated with us. So initially when we were looking at, I hope this loads. Initially when we were looking at different frameworks, we looked at Gatsby and we, going through the documentation, we're going to need dynamic pages. Everyone does. We're kind of looking, section 7 of the documentation. And that was really the thing that actually kicked us to look for something else. And in comparison, React Static is refreshingly simple. It's got this one function, and you just kind of, return your routes and do whatever you want, and just have fun. So the simple part about React Static is that it's only got two main concepts, and once you know those, you're kind of ready to go. The first thing is it's basically, so take your regular React application. It's got a folder structure. As long as you implement those two files, this is static config.js, which is the entry point, and the app.js, which is kind of where your React mounts in, then you're good to go. So going through static config.js first, it's basically a big JSON file. You have a function. You have a JavaScript file, and then you sort of return your JSON. One of those is the get routes property, where you just you can do whatever you want as long as it works in an asynchronous function. And then you just return your routes that you want to use. You can then supply data and other kinds of configuration values for building route maps and that sort of stuff. But you can see that we're getting some data here. But the best part is that to generate dynamic routes, I showed you the Gatsby version of doing that. Here's how you do it in React Static. You just basically map over it and you create your route definitions, and that's it. That's very refreshingly simple. So now that you have all of those route definitions created in React Static, you basically React Static during build time exports all of them as a separate module, which you can then import in your application.js file, app.js file, and then just use it. So this is a pyramid of death of providers, React 16. But essentially what's important here is that you can get all of those routes. It's this tiny little routes component. Those will all be built during build time and injected there. But you can also add your own dynamic routes. So for something like sign up, where you want to have a lot of dynamic data, which depends on the user, you can also add those. So it doesn't, it's not just static content. You can actually add dynamic stuff as well. So back to our scoreboard. And this one really ticked all the boxes for us. It was definitely React-based. It was very, very, very flexible. As you saw, it's basically 2 files, and other than that, just do what you want. It was extremely simple to the point where it was slightly scary. And we felt that it could scale long-term. All of that simplicity meant that we could basically choose what we want. We could add like caching, fetching strategies, that sort of stuff. Everyone can implement a function, and that's where you start with React Static. So the main drawback with React Static was that, well, this is a little scary. You're rewriting, you're going away for at least a significant amount of time. So it was a little bit daunting. But we figured, whatever. Worst case, we spend a few days, throw everything out, right, in React, in Gatsby, and just call it a day. So we went with it. We spent about 1 month implementing the first 3 or 4 pages for the initial launch, as well as our entire sign-up flow. We kept all of the other pages the same, and we actually were able to launch quite successfully. Of course, there was always stress, but who doesn't like stress in this job? So I'll first talk about what went well. So the first, and I think the most important part for us, was that it was very customizable. It integrated very well with all of our existing code base. So we're actually at one point, we were running multiple servers on the same project, and we were running both React Static, which we then built and exported all that, and we were running our old legacy Express-based proxy server, which would do all kinds of crazy stuff. But importantly, it would serve the static files that React Static would build. And we also were able to tailor it to our needs. So we were using stuff like CSS modules with Sass to build our styles. We're using things like ImageX to load all of our dynamic images. We had a ton of translations and localized content, which we would all load during build time. We would, have our own Webpack config. Basically, whatever we wanted, we could get, including a great development experience. So obviously, it supports the basics like hot reloading. Everyone does right now. But it also had pretty good detailed logging when something did go wrong, which it didn't often. And it was mostly our fault as well. So that's good to know. As far as performance goes, it was pretty much great out of the box. To this point, we haven't gone through, it's now what, 6 months after the initial decision to rewrite everything, and 4 months after we've been live. And we haven't gone through any optimization sprint so far, and it still works quite well. It's basically doing a lot of things that you would care about yourself. So it does code splitting, it minimizes everything, it just kind of works. But it also, despite not doing any of that, it gives us the option to. So it's very easy to add things like code splitting and dynamic loading and further minimize everything. And basically, that's what we're going to spend some time on in the next following weeks. But it's great that we have the option to. But maybe last but not least, it did everything we asked it to. So at the start, we started with 500 pre-built pages. So imagine each page has a different URL. They have unique content completely, which was really fun for our translators. And we're now up to 1,500. We're now loading data from about 12 endpoints at build time, which is pretty significant, I think. And all of that only means 3-minute build time. So it is fast. It works definitely for scaling long term, and we're very happy with that part. Of course, there were a few things that didn't go that well. So the first thing, you remember that get routes slide? Well, that's kind of the documentation everywhere. It covers everything, but sometimes it's frustratingly short on actual content. But on the bright side, the source was easy to understand. So if Gatsby, when you look at that, it's just, it's complicated. It's a huge beast. It's powerful. It's all that, and it's scary to go in. But with this, we're actually going okay, this doesn't work. Why? And you go and just look and you figure it out. So that's, it's not perfect, but it's a way out. And one thing that was, kind of a surprise to us was, even though there's no server in statically generated sites, there's still a build step, which is basically kind of similar to that. So you always have to keep in mind that your code might be running on Node or on the client. So you can't use stuff like local storage and that kind of thing. And you can't always use the obvious solution. And this leads us to our main takeaway from the entire thing is, if possible, always stay in React land. So I'll illustrate this with an example. We basically have this function called getLocale. So we are running in a bunch of cities. We basically have a lot of localized content. So all over the application, we need to get the current locale, which is the city and the language. And we need to use that to render data and routes and that sort of thing. And it's basically the most important part of our application and where we've had the most issues with architecturally. So the standard approach to solving this is just like, hey, let's do a service, let's call the method, and it just will get the locale from the URL or something like that. And that actually, we went with that at first, and it worked great in development, and until we launched, and in QA and everything like that. And then after about a week of running in production, we started seeing the Google results not being what we expected them to be. So the problem with that is, with this approach, is that this is not built into the pre-built files. So it's all perfectly fine when it actually bootstraps the entire JavaScript application and it just kind of refreshes all your things. But the robots see the default language, see the default city, and that doesn't work for SEO. So that was a difficult one to find, actually. When we thought about a possible solution, some things immediately jumped at us. So you remember that getRoutes function? You can inject your data into all of those routes, and when they're built, you'll be able to retrieve that data with like a higher order component that just injects the data into your props. And we needed to store some data globally. So, React 16 had just come out. Why not use the React context? That's what we did. We created, so you see the route data component there. And that's basically retrieving all of the get data props that you passed in through your route configuration, which is basically, we create a bunch of providers and we inject them with the actual props that we get from the route configuration. And then we take those and we use a higher order component to inject those into our child components very, very deep down the application. And that's how we solved our localization issue. We had no more mismatches during build and runtime, so that started working suddenly much simpler and much more perfect. And we also, since then, we've kind of started using providers and context everywhere. They've worked really well for us in making this website. So when we actually went on to other products and just kind of rewrite those as well, we started using providers and context there as well. We're actually at this point, we're kind of fighting a war on Redux and just replacing that with React 16 context. So, speaking of context, I'm going to talk a little bit about a different kind of context. After some time, actually, during preparing for this talk, I figured there must be a name for what we've been doing. So I looked around, and it turns out there is. It's called the Jamstack, which is a weird name, but it stands for JavaScript, APIs, and markup. And the whole idea is that basically you take, it's not a stack specifically of technology, it's just the general idea of how you can build applications. And the whole idea is to take all of your JavaScript that will generate your dynamic content, all of the markup that's just templates basically, and use your APIs during build time to get like your build artifacts. And that has a few important benefits. So remember GitHub pages, that's basically a Jamstack, part of Jamstack. And the deployment there is extremely easy. You push to GitHub. And you can also upload everything to a CDN because it's just static files. It's also extremely fast because, hey, if you need more performance, you just add more CDN. You don't need to wait for content, no loading screens, etc. And most importantly, for me personally, it has a great dev experience. So if you're building like a personal website or something like that, you can't really beat free. And there are a lot of services that provide, that allow you to use these static sites for free. So GitHub pages, Netlify, etc. There's like a bunch of them. And also important is that it has great reproducible builds. So when something goes wrong, you just run the build locally, and you can go in and inspect all of the markup, and it works. And you can see the problems, and you can fix them. And that's how we saw our problem. A little bit too late, but we got there eventually. And we're not alone in this. So, for example, some of you might know about a small little website called Smashing Magazine. And about a year before us, they actually went through a similar transition where they implemented their own website on Jamstack. They're much bigger than us, so all of their articles are basically loaded through and compiled during build time. They're using Hugo, which is a Go-based similar framework. And yeah, they really increased their performance about 10 times, according to them. So in summary, remember the slide from way back where React Static was the promise of Gatsby without the complexity of it. And we felt that was mostly true. And me personally, I think React Static is going to be the default framework for now on, until something else is released, probably tomorrow. But it's going to be the default for me, and it's going to be the default for HostMaker. And we were definitely very happy with it. So I'd like to thank you. And you can also see the live demo at hostmaker.com/careers. And let's keep in touch.
Thank you, Nikas. Do we have any questions over here?
So you said that you had 1,500 pages.
Yeah.
Let's say you add a page. Are you going to rebuild all the other pages, or are you going to specifically build that page?
At this point, we're rebuilding everything because it takes 3 minutes. We're okay with that time frame. But in the future, it allows us to dynamically just rebuild the parts which have changed, just like Gatsby does. Of course, Gatsby has a plugin for that, and you just kind of use that. In React Static, you have to kind of look at it and just try to go about it your own way. And there are examples of doing it, but we just haven't come to that point yet where we need to use it.
And I'm guessing that in development, it's much quicker, right?
Yeah. In development, it's instant. Since it's hot reloading, it doesn't actually do anything.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone? Oh, one at the back.
There's one back there.
Feel like challenge, Annika.
Hello. Despite you being nervous, I thought that was a really good talk.
Thank you.
So what do you do any automation around the testing of this to ensure that everything works as it is expected without actually having to do anything manually?
So it's your very usual automation. Basically, the bright side is if the build succeeds, everything works, because if you can't run it, there's no runtime without the build process. So since it does everything on Node, you'll know immediately if the build passes or not. So that's actually, in my perspective, that's a bonus, because it breaks early. Other than that, there's like the regular end-to-end automated tests, and all of those work just the way they would in a regular client-side application. Yeah. Not sure if I answered your question.
Any more?
Another one there. No, I'm joking.
Rebecca, have you not got the mic?
I did. Oh, where is it?
I think that's it.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you again, Nikas, for that. Cheers. A round of applause, please.
Thank you.
So if you'd like to talk at one of our next meetups, you can get in touch. We're looking for people to do lightning talks. We're looking for people to do sort of more longer form talks. You can go to meetup.react.london for that, or you can email hello@react.london. Thank you again to Facebook for hosting. You've been amazing at that. And again, if you hadn't got the message earlier, Red Badger are hiring quite aggressively. So if you are an engineer who's in React and likes to build things the right way, then get in touch with me or another Badger that will be floating around in the pub, which is the Marquess of Granby, which is around the corner. We'll be going there. There are drinks to be had. Sorry? Both. The next meetup will be on the 6th of November. The location is yet to be determined, but that is it from me. So I'd like to thank again the speakers for all their talks this evening, and we'll see you in the pub. Thanks, everybody.